Have you ever wondered about the real story behind international rivalries? You know, beyond the headlines. What if some huge global shifts were actually driven by forces you, well, never really expected? Today we're doing a brief overview of a really insightful new book by Mohsen Milani called Iran's Rise and Rivalry with the U.S.
Yeah, it's a fascinating read. Milani tackles some pretty critical questions like why and how did Iran end up making anti-Americanism and anti-Israeli policies so central? You know, what's the actual strategic thinking behind their regional moves?
And the methods they use.
Exactly. And he looks at the consequences of this rivalry with the U.S. in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Gaza. How did this whole asymmetric deterrence thing develop?
And does it even work for Iran in the long run? Does it actually serve their national interests? That's a key question.
Absolutely. And the book, it gives this really comprehensive view, linking, deep history with what's happening now. Milani uses everything from interviews to declassified documents. It's quite thorough.
That's why we wanted to cover it. Our goal here is just to give you a clear, kind of engaging shortcut to getting up to speed on this really crucial and often pretty misunderstood topic. So, let's get into it. We start with Chapter 1, The Riddle of Iran's Rise. And right away, Milani talks about Iran's forward defense strategy, which isn't just about, guarding borders. It's tied to seeing the U.S. as this, an existential threat, basically, and trying to level the playing field militarily through asymmetric warfare.
Yeah, trying to fight the battle away from their own shores.
Yeah.
Potentially hitting U.S. interests anywhere. To get that, you really have to look back at Iran's history, the sheer weight of these past empires.
Yeah.
The Achaemenids, Parthians, Sassanids, huge powers.
Right.
Even after the Islamic conquest around 671 CE, they converted, sure, but they kept their Persian culture, their language. They didn't just become Arabized.
That persistence is key.
Totally. Then the Safavids, 1501 to 1722, they unify the place, make Shia Islam the state religion, expand territory. But after them, under the Qajars, 1789 to 1925, things go downhill. Lots of European, Russian interference. That Anglo-Russian convention in 1907 basically split Iran up. A real low point.
So this former great empire becomes kind of a pawn by the early 20th century, but then oil changes everything.
Bingo. William Knox Darcy finds oil, 1907-08, Anglo-Persian Oil Company. And then Churchill, 1914, decides the Royal Navy needs oil, not coal.
Suddenly, Iran is strategically vital.
Absolutely essential. And this sort of paves the way for Reza Khan's coup in 21 with British blessing, and he becomes Reza Shah in 25. The Pahlavi dynasty begins.
That's when the U.S. starts playing a bigger role, and we see the seeds of anti-Americanism.
Yeah, it starts bubbling up. Think Mohammad Mossadegh in 51, nationalizing the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Huge sovereignty movement. Britain imposes sanctions. Mossadegh asks Truman for help. Gets nothing. Later, the Shah gets really close to the U.S. defense. Pact in 59, even secret U.S. listening posts aimed at the Soviets on Iranian soil. He builds up Iran's regional power, held by OPEC oil money in the late 60s.
But then Carter's human rights focus in 77 puts pressure on the Shah.
Ironically, yes. Pushing for liberalization actually empowered the opposition. Milani has this great line, Khomeini did not win the revolution, rather it was the Shah who lost it.
That's telling.
And initially, protests weren't screaming anti-American slogans. Khomeini was actually worried about the U.S. trained army. His guys even had secret talks with U.S. officials about a handover of power.
That's a nuance people often miss. After the revolution, Bazargan becomes PM, right? Their slogan was independence, freedom, Islamic Republic.
Istiqlal, Azadi, Jamhuriya Islami. And their foreign policy idea was no East, no West, non-aligned.
But that didn't last long.
Not at all. The turning point. November 4th, 1979, the U.S. Embassy takeover, triggered by that Bazargan-Brzezinski meeting getting out and the Shah being admitted to the U.S.
Looked like interference.
Exactly. Militant students seize the embassy. Khomeini initially is quiet and jumps on it, calls it a new revolution against the great Satan. The U.S. reacts hard embargoes, frozen assets, broken relations, that failed Eagle Claw rescue mission.
And this helps cement the power of the IRGC and the so-called deep state.
Absolutely. The IRGC, the revolutionary committees, the courts, they gain power, financial independence. Khomeini builds this complex, almost labyrinthine structure to keep control, a duality of power.
Wow, we're really just scratching the surface here of Iran's journey. And speaking of surprises, Milani points to something truly unexpected that really helped Iran's rise later on. We'll reveal that just before we wrap up, so definitely stick with us. So, the revolution barely settles, and boom, a massive war breaks out. Chapter 3, Iran-Iraq War, laying the foundations for Iran's rise. Milani starts with that Herodotus quote, In peace, sons bury their fathers. In war, fathers bury their sons.
Chilling, and sets the scene perfectly. September 20th, 1980, Saddam Hussein invades. He's thinking quick victory like Israel's Six-Day War. Instead, it becomes this brutal 8-year slog.
What was the history there? Why then?
Well, the border was always a bit fuzzy, technically defined way back in 1639. But then the British created Iraq in 1920, installed King Faisal in 21, just after backing Reza Khan in Iran. It's all part of the regional game.
Always complicated.
Always. Relations were tense. Then in 1975, the Shah scores a big win with the Algiers Accords. Iraq basically concedes joint control over the Arvan Rood waterway based on the Thalweg line, the deepest channel. Huge for Iran, but Saddam felt deeply humiliated.
So the revolution gave Saddam an opening, he thought.
He thought so. He completely miscalculated. Assumed the US and Soviets wouldn't care. Assumed Arab states like Saudi Arabia would bankroll him. Big mistake.
Underestimated their will to fight.
Totally. Underestimated their manpower, the revolutionary zeal, and how war can actually energize a revolution. Think French Revolution. After Iran took back Khorramshahr in May 82, Khomeini decides to take the war into Iraq.
And Iraq responds brutally. Chemical weapons.
Yeah, horrible stuff like Taboon gas. And the War of the City started in 84, basically terror bombing civilians.
And America's role in all this. You mentioned their shadow.
Right. Initially, the U.S. was neutral, even with the hostages still held, didn't condemn Iraq's invasion.
Yeah.
But then things got really murky with the Iran-Contra affair.
Selling arms to Iran secretly.
In the 80s, yeah.
Yeah.
TOW missiles, Hawk missiles, supposedly for hostage releases. Reagan even signed off on it. Oliver North, the Bible signed by Reagan.
Yeah.
The whole deal got exposed by a Lebanese paper.
Incredible.
And the CIA was actually warning that Iran might win the war, become dominant.
Yeah.
So the U.S. policy shifts, again, determined to stop an Iranian victory. They start actively helping Iraq, reflagging ships in the Gulf.
Direct clashes.
Oh, yeah. Operation Prime Chance, sinking Iranian boats. Operation Nimble Archer, praying mantis, hitting oil platforms, sinking more ships. And then the absolute tragedy.
Yeah.
The USS Vincennes shooting down Iran Air 655. A civilian plane, 290 people killed.
Just devastating. And that pushed Iran towards ending the war.
It amplified their isolation, for sure. The military leadership basically told Khomeini they couldn't win. So July 18, 1988, he accepts the ceasefire, famously said it was like drinking poison from the chalice.
That phrase really sticks with you. It's such a reluctant, painful end. We've seen the geopolitics, the external forces, but there's this internal dynamic in Iran too, right? A tension that keeps surfacing. Stay with us because we'll get to a really surprising protest chant that challenged Iran's whole foreign policy approach. Coming up next.
So that brutal war, it really forged the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Milani calls it the IRGC comes of age. They went from, volunteer groups to this really battle-hardened force. Khomeini clearly preferred them over the regular army.
And they mastered that asymmetric hybrid warfare stuff.
Exactly. And that became the model for building their network of Shia militias across the region like Hezbollah. Interestingly, when Saddam invaded Kuwait in 90, the U.S. intervention actually kept him in power, partly as a counterweight to Iran.
But then, 2003 changes everything in Iraq. The U.S. invasion. Milani calls it an unintended strategic gift for Iran.
Pretty much. Iran suddenly saw its chance. Its goals were clear. Stop an anti-Iran government in Baghdad, expand its own deterrence, get the U.S. military out permanently, and become Iraq's main trading partner.
And U.S. mistakes helped them. Abu Ghraib, the WMD stuff, proving false.
Definitely damaged U.S. credibility. And the elections the U.S. pushed for, they ended up empowering the Shia majority, who naturally had closer ties to Tehran. Maliki's time as PM 2006-2014 was all about balancing U.S. and Iranian influence.
And Iran was key in fighting ISIS there.
Crucial. Often overlooked. Qassem Soleimani was right there, leading efforts, working with the PMU's Kataib Hezbollah Badr organization. He even helped the Kurdish regional government defend Erbil against ISIS.
But then the U.S. kills Soleimani in 2020.
January 2nd, 2020. Huge moment. Killed him and the PMU leader Mohandas. Iran retaliated with Operation Martyr Soleimani ballistic missiles fired at U.S. bases in Iraq.
Let's shift to Lebanon. Hezbollah is Iran's key asset there, right?
Absolutely. There's a long history, religious ties going back centuries, Safavids inviting Lebanese Shia scholars. But Lebanese Shias were marginalized after independence. Imam Musa Sadr started empowering them in the late 50s, founded Amal.
And then Israel invades Lebanon in 82.
Operation Peace of Galilee. Ehud Barak, who later became PM, famously said, "It was our presence there that created Hezbollah. That invasion was the catalyst."
Iran steps in.
Khomeini sends about 400 to 600 IRGC guys to Syria, not Lebanon directly, to train Lebanese Shiites in asymmetric warfare. The slogan catches on. The road to Jerusalem passes through Karbala.
And Hezbollah emerges fast. The Marine barracks bombing.
October 83. Killed 241 Americans, led directly to the U.S. pulling out in 84. Huge propaganda win for Hezbollah and Iran. Iran also built influence through charity work, relief committees.
And Khomeini, the supreme leader, took a direct interest.
Very hands-on. Centralized Hezbollah structure. Even picked Hassan Nasrallah as leader. Hezbollah got into Lebanese politics in 92, but kept its weapons, kept its ties to Iran. Soleimani, from 99, really built up their military strength, made them a serious hybrid force.
We saw that in the 2006 war with Israel.
Definitely. They surprised Israel, hitting a warship, the INS Hanit, with an anti-ship missile. Nasrallah later admitted the war was costly, maybe misjudged, but it showed their capabilities. But as Milani notes, this support is expensive, like $700 million a year to Hezbollah by 2019. That causes some grumbling back in Iran.
That leads us to Syria, another key, long-standing alliance.
Yeah, even before the 79 revolution, ties were pretty friendly. Shah helped Syrians injured in the 73 war, though Assad was also quietly training anti-Shah militants.
So complex even then.
Always. But the Iran-Iraq war really cemented it. Syria shut down Iraq's oil pipeline. Iran sold Syria cheap oil. Syria gave Iran crucial missile tech. Very strategic.
And when the Syrian civil war started in 2011,
Iran went all in to support Assad. Feared an anti-Iran government taking over, sent troops, flew in arms via Iraq. Soleimani and General Hamadani developed Syria's hybrid warfare strategy, setting up local militias.
and brought in foreign fighters.
The Shia internationalism idea. Mobilize Afghan fighters, the Fatemiyon, Pakistani fighters, the Zainabiyon. Officially, they were defenders of the shrine, but they got paid, got Iranian residency. Very costly war for Iran and Syria, though. Huge humanitarian disaster, damaged Iran's image, too. Then there's Yemen. Iran operating in the gray zone, as Milani puts it.
Less direct involvement than Syria or Lebanon.
Historically, yes. Minimal Shah-era stuff. The Houthi movement really grew in the 90s, inspired partly by Iran's revolution, Khomeini's anti-U.S. stance. Yemen accused Iran of arming them early on, but the U.S. thought the weapons were a local black market initially.
But Iran's support grew.
Especially after the Houthis were sidelined in 2011. When they took Sana'a in 2014, Iran stepped up support money, politics, diplomacy, weapons tech like drones and missiles. Those 2019 attacks on Saudi oil facilities. Iran was widely blamed for planning them, showed the Houthis' reach, enabled by Iran.
Okay, finally, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ. This relationship evolved quite a bit.
Hugely. Before the revolution, the Shah actually had decent ties with Israel. De facto recognition in 1950, kind of an informal alliance against Egypt's Nasser.
That seems counterintuitive now.
It does. But the Shah's priorities shifted. Then Khomeini, even in exile, was reeling against Israel, urging Palestinian resistance. After 79, he cut ties with Israel immediately, gave their embassy to Arafat, named a street Palestine Street, Pan-Islamism.
But relations with Arafat's PLO weren't smooth.
No. Khomeini pushed Islamic principles, the PLO stayed neutral in the Iran-Iraq war. That created space. After the Oslo Accords, which Tehran hated, called treasonous, Hamas and PIJ really rose.
Driven by Islamist ideology.
Yeah. Khamenei was influenced by radicals like Sayyid Qutb. PIJ's founder, Fatih Shaqaqi, was directly inspired by Khomeini, embraced armed struggle, met Khomeini in 88. PIJ ramped up attacks. Shaqaqi was killed by Mossad in 95.
And Hamas?
Big group, 40,000 fighters maybe. Iran gave money, weapons, tech like Farsh rockets. Soleimani was key in keeping Hamas in the axis of resistance, believed Palestine's fate would be decided by fighting.
Which brings us to October 7th, 2023.
Hamas's attack. Khamenei praised them but denied Iran was directly involved, though an IRGC spokesman linked it to Soleimani's killing. Then, in April 2024, Iran's Operation True Promise, that direct missile and drone attack on Israel after the consulate strike in Damascus, a major escalation. First direct hit from Iranian soil.
Okay, so we promised a surprise from the book. While Iran often seems like this unified bloc, Milani highlights a really significant internal tension. It became super visible during the 2009 Green Movement protests.
Yeah, that was striking. Amidst all the protests about the disputed election results, you had huge crowds chanting something completely unexpected.
What was it?
They were chanting, "Neither Gaza nor Lebanon. I sacrifice my life for Iran."
Wow. directly challenging the foreign policy.
Exactly. It wasn't just about economics or politics at home. It was a clear rejection of the regime spending vast resources, Iranian lives, and money on Hezbollah and Palestinian militant groups. It showed this deep split in society about where Iran's priorities should lie, that the cost of these foreign adventures was being felt by ordinary people. Really challenges that idea of a unified public behind the regime's foreign policy.
It's a powerful detail. So, wrapping up this overview of Milani's Iran's rise and rivalry with the U.S., what are the main takeaways?
Well, first, Iran's rise wasn't accidental. It's been a deliberate 4-decade-long and very costly project.
Right. Second, the Iran-Iraq war was absolutely foundational. It forged the IRGC and locked in that asymmetric warfare approach.
Third, the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, whatever the intention, definitely opened the door for Iran's regional influence to expand significantly.
And fourth, that consistency in Iran's core foreign policy. Milani argues it comes from the deep state and the supreme leader, often overriding elected officials.
And finally, there's that constant tension ideological goals like panchiism or opposing the U.S. and Israel versus pragmatic national interests. And often, ideology wins out, even if it hurts the economy or ignores domestic problems.
Leaves you thinking.
It does. So, considering Iran's history, that sense of national pride, but also the real economic pain from sanctions, how will these internal pressures affect its future actions in the region? And what does that mean for everyone else in the Middle East? It's a huge question.
Definitely something to keep pondering. If you found this brief overview useful and you want more deep dives like this, make sure you subscribe to Booked and Hooked wherever you listen. And remember, this was just a brief overview of the book, Iran's Rise and Rivalry with the U.S. If you're interested in digging even deeper, check out our extended deep dive. You'll find the link in the description.